Welcome, my dear friend. I am glad that you made it just in time for our short stroll through one of the most interesting cities in North America. This city is considered to be the oldest city of the United States, which means that it has lots of stories to tell. To discover its richness, we will take you along with us through the busy historic downtown area, along the waterfront, and right up to a monumental fortress that once helped defend this place. While we take in the scenery, let one of our local residents be your guide through the turbulent story of this crown jewel of Floridian history. Have fun!
Hello, my name is Juan. I was born in St. Augustine, the city my great-great-great-grandfather helped establish centuries ago. I speak not as a historian, but as a descendant of one of the soldiers who marched with the Spanish in 1565 to lay the foundation for this remarkable city, the oldest continuously inhabited European established settlement in the United States. The winds of this land, heavy with the scent of salt and oak, carry the stories of my ancestors, the soldiers, settlers, priests, and explorers who came before. Through their eyes, I will share with you the rich and often turbulent history of this place. It all began in 1565, when Pedro Menendez de Avilés, a seasoned admiral and soldier from Spain, led an expedition across the Atlantic to secure Spain's claim to the New World. The Spanish had long coveted the Florida coastline, which had become a strategic point in their quest to expand their empire and defend against foreign threats. Menendez's mission was clear: establish a settlement, secure the region for the Spanish crown, and drive out the Huguenot French, who had also set their sights on Florida and whom the Catholic Spanish considered to be dangerous heretics. On August 28, 1565, after months of sailing through treacherous waters, Menendez sighted land and immediately encountered the French at the St. Johns River, where they had already formed their settlement, Fort Caroline. The Spanish fleet subsequently finally dropped anchor along the coast on September 8th. They landed near the site of the present-day St. Augustine, a natural harbor surrounded by marshlands and thick forests, perfect for a fort. Menendez had no intention of building just another outpost. He was creating a fortress, a beacon of Spanish Catholicism in a land where the French had already tried to plant their flag. The Spanish settlers established a small fort made of wood and earth, which they named Fort San Agustin, later to be known simply as Castillo de San Marcos. It was a humble beginning, but it was a beginning nonetheless, a place from which Spain would try to defend its claim to Florida. The Spanish advance, however, did not come unchallenged. The French had already attempted to establish their own colony in Florida. In 1564, René Goulain de Laudonnière had founded a settlement called Fort Caroline along the St. Johns River near present-day Jacksonville. This settlement had been reinforced by French troops under the leadership of Jean Ribault just days before the Spanish arrived in Florida. The French were Protestant Huguenots, and their presence in Florida was not only a political challenge, but also a religious one, as Spain was a staunchly Catholic empire. The rivalry between the French and Spanish escalated quickly, and it took only a few days until Ribault set sail to attack the newly founded Spanish settlement. Unfortunately for the French, a hurricane intercepted their plans and carried their ships far to the south, wrecking them on the coastline. Almost at the same time, Menendez, determined to eliminate the French threat, mounted a daring land-based assault on Fort Caroline. On September 20th, 1565, just a few days after the hurricane had decimated and scattered the French forces, Menendez led a swift and brutal attack on Fort Caroline. The Spanish soldiers were met with little resistance and massacred the remaining defenders of the fort, sparing women and children who were later sent by ship to Havana. Just as the French settlement had been removed from the map, Menendez learned that a group of French hurricane survivors were on the beaches south of the Spanish settlement, attempting to make their way back to Fort Caroline. The shipwrecked men were met by Spanish soldiers, who killed most of the 127 French soldiers, sparing only 16 lives. This massacre was repeated only 2 weeks later, when another group of French survivors appeared at the river inlet. This time, 134 were killed, among them Jean Ribault. From this day on, the inlet and its river have been called Matanzas, meaning slaughter in Spanish. The victory over the French solidified Menendez's position, but it did not end the struggle for control over Florida. The Spanish still had to contend with the French, English, and the unpredictable forces of nature. In the years following the founding of St. Augustine, the Spanish faced many hardships. Disease ravaged the settlers, and the hot, humid climate of Florida proved difficult for Europeans to endure. Additionally, the constant threat from foreign powers, particularly the English and French, kept the city in a perpetual state of readiness. One of the most significant threats came in 1586, when an English fleet led by the infamous privateer Sir Francis Drake attacked the settlement. Drake's forces razed much of the town, and for a time it seemed as though the settlement might be gone forever. But the Spanish, resilient as always, returned to the site, rebuilt the town and wooden fortifications. In the early 1600s, the Spanish town served as a home port from which expeditions against the English colony at Jamestown were launched. In 1668, our beautiful city was raided by the English buccaneer Robert Searle as retaliation for the Spanish destruction of New Providence in the Bahamas. This finally prompted the long overdue construction of a more permanent masonry fortress. The construction of the Castillo de San Marcos, which still stands today, began in 1672. It was a monumental task, and it would take nearly 23 years to complete. The fort was built using coquina, which consists of seashells bonded together to form a material similar to limestone. Coquina proved surprisingly effective at absorbing cannonball impacts, which was one of the reasons why the siege of our city in 1702 by English colonial forces from Carolina lasted for 2 months, until Spanish forces from Havana came to the rescue. As the years passed, Spain's power in Florida began to wane. By the mid-18th century, the British were a dominant force in North America, and in the 1763 Treaty of Paris, which ended the 7 Years' War, Spain ceded Florida to Great Britain in exchange for Havana and Manila. The Spanish had been driven out, but their legacy remained. Our streets, our buildings, our unique blend of cultures, and our fortifications all bore the marks of Spanish influence. Spain would regain Florida 21 years later in 1784 in yet another Treaty of Paris, which this time ended the American Revolutionary War and recognized the independence of the 13 colonies as the United States. But Florida's role in Spanish colonial strategy would be diminished, as it was being regarded as unprofitable by the Crown. The newborn United States, however, started to see Florida as a vital step in extending its territory. Aided by the destruction of our historic city by a devastating hurricane in 1811 and a declining economic situation, Florida was ceded to the U.S. in 1821 as part of the Adams-Onis Treaty. St. Augustine, still Florida's capital city at the time, had seen its final session to this day. As I walk the streets of this beautiful city today, I see the traces of this long and turbulent history. The Castillo de San Marcos stands as a monument to the city's founding, a testament to the Spanish soldiers like my great-grandfather who helped carve out a place in this unforgiving land. I hear the stories passed down through generations, the rivalries, the battles, and the survival of a people determined to claim a new world for their king and their faith. The struggle between the Spanish and the French, and later the English, shaped this city. It was the French who first attempted to colonize the region, but it was the Spanish who persisted, and their legacy remains embedded in the very stones of this place. The city stands as a reminder of those who came before, of the soldiers, settlers, and dreamers who fought for a vision of a new world. It is a city born of conflict and perseverance, a living history etched into the land, its heart still beating with the echoes of its past. And as long as I walk these cobbled streets, I carry the story forward, as my great-great-great-grandfather once did. Thank you for joining me on my stroll through the streets and rich history of my beloved hometown. It would make me tremendously happy to see you wandering these neighborhoods one day. If you do decide to visit, consider coming in December or January. As each year, the city lights up for the Nights of Lights during this time, which adds just a little more magic to this otherwise already extraordinary place.